So just want to say a quick hello on camera to everybody, and I'm going to take myself off camera and jump right into the presentation in the service of time. But know that we'll have live Q&A. I'll come back on camera at the end. And so, as I share this content with you, if questions arise or insights arise or challenges even, please, jot them down, remember them. I'd love to hear from you and interact with you at the end of the presentation. So I'm just going to go right ahead and jump right in here. Okay. Okay. So let's see here. First slide. Okay. So yeah, I'm so excited to share this content with you, and I see that lots of you have taken the quiz and you've got your results, and it'll be wonderful for you to hear a little bit more detail about each of your archetypes towards the end of the presentation today. I'll start by just sharing that most people, when they want to empower their relationship to money and transform their relationship to money, they tend to focus exclusively on their practical money management skills. And what happens when you only focus on the practical dimension to improving your relationship to money, it's a little bit like a yo-yo diet. It's not sustainable. You do what you think you should be doing for a few weeks, and then you slip up and you kind of binge and go the other way. And it's just very difficult, and it kind of fuels this feeling of not being very good at doing this and not having a very empowered relationship to money. And the reason for that is because having an empowered relationship to money is having like two wings to the bird. And the other wing that absolutely must be attended to is awareness of our internal money drivers and triggers, or what I call the psychology of money. It's our internal relationship to our worth, actually, and how that translates into our relationship to money. So we're going to focus on that part today. We need both. I'll just make that clear. So, both are really crucial for that empowered relationship to money. And what I want to say is that everything I'm going to be sharing today is relevant for you, whether you're trying to create more money, more abundance, or perhaps you have plenty and, maybe you've got a very secure financial future ahead of you, but you're sensing that there's something disempowered, something off about your relationship to money. In one way or another. And so this content is relevant for you either way. And I have clients that are very wealthy and clients that are very much looking to create more wealth in their lives. So the way that one of the most important dimensions to this to understand is that how we do money is reflected in how we do most other things in our life. And that might come as a surprise. But when you think about it, how we do money impacts, or our relationship to money impacts how we give and receive to ourselves and to others. It impacts what we believe we deserve and what we believe is even possible for ourselves, or what we have permission for. It impacts what you value and what you invest in. And it impacts how you even how you function, particularly in relationships that are close to you, particularly love relationships. And that's a big, hot, separate topic, which I'll touch into a little bit more down the road here. And of course, your relationship to money will always impact your business or your career and your bank account. So, we all have a money story, okay? Nobody's exempt. I used to think that some people were exempt. Nobody's exempt, and I've seen all kinds of things, as you can only imagine in the work that I do. There was a time when I thought that only I had a money story, and I've learned that it's not true. So I'm going to share a little bit more about how our money stories come to be. And so what happens is that from birth until about age 8 or 9, we receive a tremendous amount of messaging from our families, from our peers, our neighbors, our faith communities, our schools, anyone who is in our circle, what I call our circle of influence. And we may not realize it. Again, this may come as a surprise, but we're receiving messages directly and indirectly about money almost every day in one way or another. And I'm sure that maybe even this comment, brings some of those messages to mind for you. But what happens is that After about age 8 or 9, those messages become unconscious, right? And what tends to happen, particularly for women, is we translate those messages about money, we convert them unconsciously into beliefs about our worth. And then after about age 8 or 9, that goes all of that stuff goes into the unconscious, and at this amazing percentage, like 94 to 96%, and only about 4% remains conscious. And all of that messaging becomes filters, like a prescription to a pair of glasses that we're wearing. And we start to see life through those filters. We start to navigate our relationship to our worth and to money through those filters that are full of messages that may have never been our own. And we begin making decisions about our lives, and particularly about money, through those filters. And then we get results that we're either happy with or not happy with, and we don't know how it's happening. Why is the same? Why, no matter how much money do I make, do I always manage to carry debt? Or why, no matter how much money that I save, am I still afraid to spend any? Do I still believe that there might still not be enough when I really need it? So we're kind of living in default according to these messages, and the question becomes, whose prescription are you wearing? Is it your own belief system, or is it part of the messaging that went into your unconscious and became subconscious, what we call triggers and drivers, that came from others in your world? So we don't want to continue living. An empowered relationship means coming out of default, right? Because when you're living in default to this messaging that you received when you were younger, it can feel like a free fall. And you never know where you're going to land, and you may experience things such as inconsistent money behavior and results. You probably will feel like you're swinging on a pendulum, from the inside, something that has to do with your belief system, from good girl to bad girl, over and over again, which is very disempowering. And you probably, on some level, feel like a hostage to a box of shoulds that really don't fit for you, that are just not your own. And you may not know how to transform and heal your relationship to money, within the structures that you've been attempting to. So the most important component to changing is understanding the specific beliefs and messaging that's driving your particular money decisions and your particular money behavior. And this becomes something that's quite unique to each of us, the way that we express our beliefs and our messaging and our decisions. And when you finally understand what's behind, it's the most empowering awareness that can happen for you. And then you're in a position to begin making different decisions. And then the potential to see different results increases exponentially. And it's actually quite simple. So I'm going to share, I'm sure you're just dying to know how you can crack your own code. And I'm going to, before I jump into sharing with you some of the specifics about the money archetypes, so that you can kind of self-identify with some of the results of your quiz, I'm going to share my own money story briefly, the short version, and to give you a sense of how this worked for me. So I'll start by saying that, I had, several years ago, I had gone through a big reinvention process myself, and I invested a tremendous amount of time and money in all kinds of coach certification programs and different types of transformational modalities. And I realized that, I came out the other end feeling like, because I had been coaching most of my career as well, and so I came out the other end with all these new skills, feeling like a pretty masterful coach. And then I realized that I had a huge blind spot myself when it came to business and money. And so I went through a very deep dive kind of a process with this money archetype work that I'm going to share with you in a few minutes. And I had a breakthrough at a level that I'd never been able to before, no matter how many different things I had tried. And so after all these other certifications, I realized I needed to get licensed in this work as well. And sure enough, it's been kind of the cornerstone of the work that I have ended up doing with so many women in the same way. So my story is that I was a very visual and artistic child, and I always loved beautiful things. And my mother was really different. She had a very restrictive, very denying relationship with herself and with money, and with giving herself anything. So if I wanted anything, I was repeatedly asked, do you want it or do you need it? And I quickly learned that it was not okay to want anything, really. And so I internalized that message to mean that I didn't deserve anything. And I grew up with a very confused relationship around desire and deserving. And so fast forward to adulthood, I found myself in my mid-30s, divorced, with no debt, great credit, and a bunch of credit cards, and nobody there like my mother to slap my hand every time I wanted something. So I began to shop for the first time in my life. I found myself shopping to fill a void. And it was the void where I didn't get very much nurturance growing up. So every time I'd buy something beautiful, whether I could afford it or not, I actually would feel loved and fulfilled initially. I'd get this just really warm and fuzzy feeling. And then I would, look at the credit card statements building up, and I would swing the other way on the pendulum to feeling ashamed and some self-loathing. And then I would restrict myself again, and I'd feel unnurtured and suffocated, just like I did in my family. And so as I said, this good girl, bad girl pendulum was swinging back and forth for me, was a vicious cycle, and was really disempowering. And no matter what I tried, I couldn't seem to crack my own code. And so at a certain point, as I said, I took the quiz that you just took, and I understood my particular archetypal profile. And what the archetypal profile does is it will highlight your natural money strengths and gifts, which we all have, and it will also highlight your money vulnerabilities and blind spots, which we all have. And so it did that for me. And when I saw what was driving my behavior from that sort of the core sort of blocking, limiting beliefs that I had internalized from a very young child, I understood what was driving my behavior from the inside out. I experienced a very profound level of self-acceptance and self-forgiveness, actually. And I understood that until I had shined a spotlight on what was operating and driving me from behind the scenes, that I could not have possibly done things differently until I understood what was triggering and driving my money decisions. And so this was a profound breakthrough for me. And what happened was, and I'm not one of these people that, professes that everybody's going to, kind of have an overnight, transformation. I believe transformation typically takes place in a multi-layered process over time. But in this particular instance, I actually had pretty much an instantaneous breakthrough transformation where the very next time I went shopping, after I understood my archetypal profile, I experienced a different kind of an internal gauge, so that when I saw something beautiful that was beyond my means, instead of purchasing it when I chose not to purchase it, I felt like in my solar plexus on a very kind of embodied level, this sense of whether purchasing the item was in alignment or out of alignment with my budget. And when it wasn't, and I chose not to purchase it, rather than feeling restricted as I used to, I experienced the reverse. And I experienced that by remaining in alignment with my own reality and not buying what I couldn't afford, I felt the same kind of nurturance and fulfillment that in the past I'd only been able to experience when I purchased something. It felt like a miracle to me, truly. It was the exact opposite of what I'd been struggling with for years and years and years. And so something that I now understand through the resilience work that I do is that neuroscience has really determined that self-acceptance is an essential key when it comes to changing something that we're not happy with about ourselves or our lives. And one of my favorite neuroscientists actually says self-acceptance is the master key. So more on that in a moment. I'm going to jump to the archetypes because it's going to take a little time. I want to make sure we get to the part that I know you're curious about. So I'll tell you, for those of some of you probably know what an archetype is, and maybe have had some experience working with archetypes, and some may not. And so An archetype, and perhaps depending on how old you are, you may know of the late great Swiss psychologist Carl Jung, whose psychology, whose therapy work was completely based in archetypes. An archetype is a pattern of characteristics, of strengths, of gifts, of beliefs, of fears, and challenges, all the different components to a human being's psyche, actually, and they exist, these different patterns exist within the deep collective unconscious. And so I know that's a little bit elusive probably for some of you, but what that means is that there are certain universal patterns. And so while several of you, let's say on the call, might have the same lead archetype, it's going to be expressed, you're going to have similar characteristics, but it's going to be expressed uniquely for each person according to your personality and the particular messaging that you received. So I'm going to jump right in now, and I'm going to chat a little bit about each of the archetypes. And so as I talk through this, if you've taken the quiz, if you haven't taken the quiz, you'll have plenty of opportunity to do that after the presentation, so no worries. And you'll get a snapshot of your results with an opportunity to chat with me in greater detail if you wish, free of charge. So no worries if you just want to listen while you're here. Many of you did take the quiz, and so you already got your snapshot results. I'm going to try to take these results a little bit deeper for you in the presentation today. And so as you listen, in this system, your lead archetype is going to represent, meaning the one that you scored the highest, is going to represent your predominant money personality. And that's the part of your money personality that you probably will be somewhat familiar with. It's probably how you like to be seen or how you know you're seen. So your last archetype then, the 8th archetype, or the archetype that you scored the lowest on, is going to be what we consider your shadow money archetype. And so what that means is that that's the part of your money personality that you are probably the least aware of, the least connected to. Perhaps you may have had, and I'll explain more about the shadow in a moment, but that's going to represent what we would think of as more of a disowned part of your money personality. And so, and in this system, the top 3 are significant and the last. And so your second and third highest scores also are going to play into your kind of conscious money personality. So I would say to you, as you listen to me talk through these today, focus primarily on your lead archetype. And when you hear me speak about your second and third as well, you're going to recognize you're going to identify probably with some of those characteristics. When I speak about the archetype that you've scored the lowest on, you're probably not going to identify as heavily with that. And again, I'll talk more about that in a little bit. So, so here we go. Okay, so starting with Accumulator. So if your lead archetype is Accumulator, you're probably somebody who has a very naturally great money hygiene, I'm going to say. And so that's somebody who is fantastic with accumulating wealth. Basically, making money and saving money probably comes pretty naturally to you. You probably, like to save money. You like to watch it grow. And so, you might be an accountant or a financial advisor or a banker or a bookkeeper. These are professions we often find accumulators in. And so those are all gifts, and not everybody has those gifts. The downside to Accumulator is that the challenge is that a lot of that wonderful money hygiene can be fear-driven. And so, you might be making some of those decisions about money that allow you to secure your financial future based on fear of not having enough. So you're sort of creating wealth based on sort of a scarcity mindset. And so this is not so great because sometimes for accumulators, there's this fear of investing in their lives or investing in their businesses or their careers. And so things stay very small, kind of constricted or contracted. And life can become very sort of routine and not very growthful or fun for an accumulator who's not more aware of these propensities. Okay. So moving on to nurturer. Nurture, as you might guess, is of course very nurturing by nature. So if your lead archetype, or again, one of your top 3 is nurturer, you've got some real gifts in the area of leading team. If you happen to be in a position of leading any kind of a team, you're somebody who's going to see the potential in other people, and you're going to love blossoming that potential and helping people to actualize their potential. People will love working for you and with you for that reason. They'll feel very seen, very cared about. And so those are all gifts, of course. And the downside for nurture is going to be where you're going to be much more inclined and much more comfortable sponsoring others before you sponsor yourself. And so there's a very important life lesson. And so and actually everything exists on a spectrum, of course. And so on the far end of the spectrum, the far end of the challenged spectrum for nurture, you might find yourself actually empowering other people with money. So I've had clients who've really wanted and needed to do some work around giving large amounts of money to other people, finding themselves without enough to live a really fulfilling life themselves. And so there's a very important life lesson for nurturers in terms of learning to sponsor themselves first, focusing on self-care, spending more money on themselves, frankly, and learning how to empower other people in authentic ways that don't involve money and don't involve over delivery. Because at the far end of the spectrum, nurturer can feel like a bit of a martyr and end up kind of resentful and taken advantage of. Alchemist is a whole other story. And so Alchemist is, some of the gifts of Alchemist are that they have wonderful, road less traveled, creative ideas about how to make money. And they also are very devoted to doing work that positively impacts humanity. And so if you have Alchemist archetype in your top 3, particularly your lead, you're probably identifying with some of that. And so the challenge for Alchemist is that they tend to have a love-hate relationship with money, and they don't always understand why money is so important, why money matters so much anyway. But the truth is that they're unable to fully express and fully actualize their wonderful, creative, road less traveled ideas that would probably benefit others without money. So it's crucial for alchemists to reconcile this love-hate relationship with money and understand that money can be an amazing power for good. And then they're going to be likely to find themselves in positions where they can express that and channel that to do great good. In this system, there are 8 archetypes, and 3 of them are leadership, or have very strong leadership capacity, and celebrity is one of those. So the celebrity archetype and each of the leadership archetypes have very different personas. So the celebrity is a very, as you might guess, a very visible, kind of sparkly, shining, kind of radiant leader. And the celebrity likes to look beautiful, loves beautiful things, likes to dress beautifully, tends to have the appearance of having a lot of money, whether they do or not. And sometimes they do, but whether they do or not, looking really good is important to celebrity. Celebrity tends to attract 5-star experiences. 5-star people tend to gravitate towards them. They're wonderful at stretching the paradigm on luxury for others. They're yes people. They say, yeah, go get the massage. Let's go to the expensive restaurant. This kind of thing. And so for celebrity, they help bring others, kind of up a notch. They help others give themselves permission to give themselves beautiful things and do wonderful things for themselves. And they're also generous. And so on the downside, on the challenged side, when celebrity doesn't, it's very important to celebrity to feel appreciated. And when celebrities don't feel appreciated, they're going to spend to fill that void. And so typically they might overspend and then they'll carry debt. So for somebody whose lead archetype is celebrity, if they don't have debt in this moment, they probably did at some point in time. Most celebrities do. And so the life lesson, I would say, for celebrity is to understand, to surround themselves with people who really value them for who they are at a very sort of core soul level, and understand that they're deeply loved and valued and enough, regardless of appearances, regardless of how much money they do or don't have or how they look. Okay, going on to Maverick. There's an awful lot I could say about each of these, but I'm moving along kind of quickly here in the service of time so that we can also have plenty of time to interact. And so Maverick is another, it's the second leadership money archetype. It's a whole other personality. So Maverick is a risk taker, as you might guess. And so on the positive side, a Maverick will be someone who's not afraid to take risks, not afraid to try new things, to try new ideas. They are also very comfortable standing out from the crowd with their ideas, and they don't care if anybody thinks it's a good idea or gets it. They're going to, they're going to do some pretty cool and unusual risky business activities. And so sometimes they're really successful, sometimes not. And so the Maverick is also very comfortable with financial complexity and structuring very complex financial deals. So they're good with money. By the same token, on the far end of the challenge end of the spectrum, they could be somebody who's really turned on by fairly extreme highs and lows. They might be drawn to get rich quick schemes. They might actually even like gambling or something like that. And so the life lesson for Maverick is to identify the bread and butter income. What is it that's going to stabilize their income so they can take those, so they can play with the additional money they have and take some exciting risks to feed that part of their spirit without it wreaking, chaos, causing chaos and a huge roller coaster ride in their life. Okay, and so romantic is next. And romantic has some similarities to celebrity, not so much of a leader, but somebody who believes on the positive end very much, believes in the generosity of the universe, believes they will always have enough, that there will always be enough, and loves to have fun, kind of has a joie de vivre sort of spirit. And so, can be a lot of fun to be around, can encourage other people to have more fun and bring more joy into their life. And by the same token, similar to celebrity, if their spirit is not fed more deeply with something fulfilling that really doesn't have to do with money, then they will also spend to fill that void and tend to carry debt, tend to overspend. And so it's really important, in the same way that for celebrity, it's crucial to feel appreciated. For romantic, it's crucial to have a spirit-feeding activity that they regularly engage in, whether that's a creative endeavor or spending time with people they feel really fed by. One of the great life lessons for romantic is finding the way to spend a day that feels really fulfilling, really nourishing, that doesn't involve a lot of spending. Learning how to incorporate those kind of activities into their life. For ruler, ruler is the third leadership money archetype, and yet again another persona from Maverick, and celebrity, the other two leadership archetypes. So ruler is a real workhorse. So ruler is a very typically naturally successful business person, and tends to be good at making money, very generous with the people that work for them. They tend to be empire builders, and if you're a ruler and you don't identify with the empire builder component, it may not be a literal empire. For many it is actually, multiple locations, multiple employees, this sort of thing. But if you don't identify with that, then it might be an empire builder on a different level. And so ruler tends to have a lot of natural innovation, creativity when it comes to business ideas, and they tend to work really, really hard and to the exclusion of other quality of life experiences. And sometimes this workaholicism for ruler is actually masking some less than positive beliefs about their true self-worth. And so they're sort of driven. And what happens for ruler when they move towards midlife is if they have not found more balance and begun to incorporate more spirit feeding, soul feeding work into their business, they begin to feel like they're going to burn out and crash. And the problem for ruler is that they don't always believe that they can make that good money and be as successful as they tend to naturally be while also doing a business that feeds their soul, but they can typically. So this is a false belief. And so one of the greater life lessons for ruler is understanding that they can actually pursue their dream business, their dream work, and probably do quite well financially doing it, as really doing something that feeds their soul. It doesn't have to be all sweat and blood, sweat and tears kind of work. So that's ruler. Connector is an archetype that, as you might guess, is a great relationship person by nature. And so with connector, some of the strengths have to do with really being somebody that people tend to like. They tend to like people and people tend to like them. And so because of that, wealth tends to come to connector through their relationships. And so it's very important for connector to intentionally maximize the power of their network. And so when I work with people who have a lead connector archetype, we really want to look at typically they have a lot of wonderful people in their circle and, people that are close and maybe not so close, but they're not always intentionally reaching out and, looking for partnerships and looking for support from the many people in their world that would probably be delighted to introduce them to people that could be supportive or help with them with ideas, this sort of thing. And so on the challenged end of the spectrum for connector tends to have a blind spot when it comes to their numbers. And this can be almost a childlike kind of a blind spot where they don't look at their numbers, they don't know their numbers, they don't want to know their numbers. And so they might make kind of, unnecessary financial errors in their banking, basic banking, checks bouncing, getting fees that they could have avoided if they had just kind of taken a look once a week. And for connector, the big life lesson is, even though initially it may feel like a bitter pill because they've neglected it for so long, they may not like what they see initially when they do face into their numbers, but ultimately, by knowing their numbers, it positions them to make different it gives them clarity, and it positions them to make different financial decisions immediately. And this tends to be extremely eye-opening and empowering for connector, because the moment they know their numbers and begin making different decisions, they see things changing for the better, usually. So that's really important. So I'm going to summarize now, and then I'm going to open the lines for Q&A, and we can talk a bit. And so in summary, what I really want to leave you with is a couple of teaching points. The first is that you absolutely, positively can transform and empower your money story. Everybody can. And the way that you do that is that you begin by taking 100% responsibility for your own relationship to money. What I mean by that is that you make it your mission to understand what's driving your relationship with money, what kind of beliefs and messaging are operating subconsciously that are creating the results you're getting that you may not be happy with. You make it your mission to take responsibility so that it's no longer a default relationship to money that has more to do with your mom's beliefs or your dad's beliefs or your aunt, Selma's beliefs, but that you really have turned the lights on so that you can begin becoming the creator of your own money destiny. And so, and the last point is that once you do, you're able to really consciously then choose to play to your money gifts, which will be unique to you based on your archetypal profile. And you'll know what your money blind spots are so that you can, choose to make financial decisions that really do support your personal growth goals and your business goals or your career goals, and that really very organically over time create a sustainable financial future for you. So thanks so much for being here, and I'm going to come back on camera now and we can chat, and I hope that you'll ask me, and there's no question that's too small, no question that's silly, and I'd love to hear anything, insights, challenges, anything else you'd like to know more about, all of that's welcome. So, okay, so here we go. I wish I could see you too.
Thanks, Michelle. That was so interesting. And I'll remind everyone that if you have a question, you can use the chat box or you can email info@savvyladies.org. And I see we had a question come in, which is, you mentioned something about our relationship with money playing out in our relationship with others, particularly love relationships. Can you explain what you meant and maybe even give an example of that?
Oh, exactly. Sure. Yeah, that's always a real hot topic. And it's really fascinating. So, when I said, I think it was one of the earlier slides where I said that, our relationship with money shows up in our beliefs about giving and receiving, our beliefs about, it looks like, Maggie, it looks like somebody's indicating they couldn't get into the Q&A spot or something. Just gonna, maybe, I'm not
Yes.
sure if you said it. Okay.
Okay, and I know you'll be talking about the link for the quiz as well at the end. I guess we can,
Yeah.
and we'll be sending that out as well. So we'll try and make sure everyone has access to that.
Sure. I'm going to just see if actually what I'll do is I'll put that slide up. There we go. While I'm chatting here, so people can just take a look at that as well. So,
Okay.
yeah. So okay. So regarding love and money. So when we say that our relationship with money is reflected in how we give and receive to ourselves and others, when it's reflected in what we believe we deserve and have permission for, it's reflected in what we value and invest in, and what we even believe is possible for ourselves to have and receive in life. I could interchange the word money, love, with money, and everything I just said would still make perfect sense, right? So they're really inextricable. And I'm going to give you an example of how this works with the archetypes. So how it plays out in love relationships. And so most often, most of my clients, my private clients, are women, and very often they want at some point to bring if they have a significant other or husband, they want to bring them in on a piece of our money work together. And so I'll use an example of a couple of one of my longtime wonderful women clients. And so when she brought her husband in, we sat down together for half day intensive, and my first question is always, so what's the sticking point with money in your relationship? What would you like to be different? And I said, with money, right? And so he says, I want more hugs. And she says, I want him to stop spending so much. So very interesting, right off the bat. And so what we understood through our conversation and our time together was that he was a celebrity, and celebrities, as I said, really love beautiful things. It's part of their nature. It's not something that they need to try to stop doing. It's who they are. It's a part of their authentic self-expression. And so they also have a deep need to feel appreciated. And so when he didn't feel appreciated by her, he would spend, and he would usually overspend. He'd go want to buy a $2,000 butcher block. He didn't mess around. And what happened, and she was an accumulator. So she liked to save every dime, and she had difficulty buying a $12 pair of earrings for herself. And so she was really hoarding. And when she was irritated with him, she also hoarded affection, not just money, and became very critical. And so accumulators can be because they have such excellent money hygiene, they can be very critical of people who are spending more than they are. They can get very judgmental. It's just part of the profile. something to be aware of. And so she would become really critical of him, and then he would feel unappreciated. She'd withhold affection because she was withholding money and affection in the same way, and he'd go and overspend. And so they had this really challenging dynamic. And once they understood what was operating on a deeper level, that she was afraid to spend, and so she was afraid when he was spending because she had this unconscious belief that there would never be enough no matter how much they had. And once she also once he understood that was operating for her, and she understood that he really needed to feel more appreciated. He needed more affection. He needed more, pats on the back, to have more wins, as they say. She understood that he was spending to fill the void that she wasn't really participating in filling for him. So it changed their conversation radically. And within a very short time, I got a great note from him that not only had it made them better partners to each other, but the bank account was growing because they were consulting each other and able to have a very different kind of conversation with each other. So I hope that that's a good example.
Okay, great. Thank you. We did have another
Absolutely.
question for you. It's, could you share a little bit more about money shadows and how we can heal them?
Sure. Right. So that's a big topic, and it's an important one. And so, so your eighth archetype in your money profile, in your archetypal profile, will be your shadow, as I said. So here's what a shadow is. Basically, when we're getting all this messaging and all the conditioning I talked about as we're growing up, sometimes we're getting positive messages, sometimes negative. And so whatever was approved of and loved and kind of supported in our circle of influence is going to become more of our persona, more of our lead, the characteristics of the lead archetype typically. Whatever was disapproved of, or kind of shunned, in our family belief system or in our faith community belief system, etc., that's going to become a shadow. We're going to say to ourselves unconsciously when we're growing up and we're maybe sort of told that this such and such belief or attitude or behavior is not okay, we're going to kind of decide, because we all want love when we're growing up, right? And so we're going to say to ourselves, I just won't be that way then. Okay, I just won't say those things then. I won't behave that way then. And we stuff those beliefs that are not approved of into the closet, and we disown them, we disconnect, but they remain a part of ourselves. And so they go into the shadows. That's why we call them shadows. What happens is that when we get older, when we're adults, we reach a point usually somewhere in our, developmentally, people reach this point at different ages. But typically, as we move towards 40 and beyond, if not before, those shadows, those disowned parts, will start to kind of siphon energy away from our true power, sort of our wholeness, if we don't shine a spotlight on them and begin to integrate them. I'll give you an example. I'll give you the example that's coming to mind in the moment is one of my own. So, in my family, when I was struggling financially, I got a lot of compassion and a lot of support and a lot of love, and everybody felt really bad, and they were really comfortable with when I was struggling, when I wasn't doing really well. But when I did well, if I did really well, if my light shined really brightly, or if I made a lot of money, or if someone gifted me something really generous, there was resentment. There was more of a "who do you think you are" kind of a response, which felt really crappy. And so well into adult, and so I stopped expressing the desire to do well. I stopped sharing that I wanted to, be paid well for my gifts and be able to, lead a quality life and give generously to others as I wished as well. I just stopped talking about that because it seemed to threaten people. Well into adult, and so that became a shadow. That became a denied belief, a denied wish, a denied part, really. And so well into adult life, I found myself struggling financially. And one day, I've done so much work, of course, on myself. And after doing this work for quite some time, one day, just walking through my living room, I remember this. All of a sudden, I kind of had an epiphany, and I realized, wow, you know, I really do want to. I want to make great money. I really do want to do very well for all the reasons I just mentioned. And I realized that you know, my parents were uncomfortable with that, but that's not something that I was ever uncomfortable with. It's something that I always wanted, and that I really needed to bring that out of the shadows and own that and start talking about that again with the people close to me in my life. And I knew that once I integrated that back into who I really am, it would make it that much more possible for that to happen. And indeed it has. So it's really important to, we go on this journey where we need to retrieve those disowned parts, those disowned beliefs, and come into alignment with who we really are.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. And we have another question for you, which is, how do we transition to putting our own financial future first when we have emerging adult children and we're used to supporting and putting them first financially? I'm finding it very tough to put my own future first.
Interesting. Okay, that's a great question. And can I ask what is your lead art? What is your lead archetype and what is your last archetype?
Let me see if we can get a response for this one.
And if not, it's okay too, but it would be great to be able to bring that in.
Okay. I can let you know if we get those answers.
Okay, sure, sure.
Oh,
So I
you know
think,
what? I have it right here.
okay,
the,
great.
the lead is romantic slash nurturer slash alchemist.
Okay, that's a tie. That's a big tie. That's okay. Do we know what the last one is?
Shadow is accumulator.
Okay, okay. So yeah, um, so what I would say, and thanks so much for asking this question. And so what I would say to you is, those three that you are tied, we would break a tie. When I'm working with people, it's important to break it. However, those three, the characteristics of all of those three are definitely influencers for you. And what that tells me is that this always comes back to there's no cookie cutter anything when it comes to this. So what it tells me is that for you, just the question alone tells me that there's something, we'd have to do some detective work. And so there's something in there that there's got to be some belief from somewhere that's feeling like you don't have permission to put yourself first, like you said, to sponsor yourself, to focus on your own self-care, and to actually invest in nurturing yourself. And I'm guessing that maybe there's a belief that, and I don't know what it is, I'm just completely guessing, but there must be a negative association with what that means, or what that would mean to your family, or what that would mean, if someone observed you doing that and when you've got the emerging adult children. And so the way we are always set free from these limiting beliefs is by, really looking deeply at them, looking them in the face, really with brutal self-honesty. And you kind of need to understand, there's got to be some narrative going on within that's not giving you permission. I wouldn't believe for a second that your actual circumstances are preventing you from taking some doable steps, maybe some baby steps to begin putting yourself first. So we can stair step our growth. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. We don't have to go from sacrificing everything for our children to suddenly, you know, not thinking about them at all, and spending tons of money on ourselves. We can begin taking one step, like one, committing to, and really committing, like with a by when date, to doing something that has felt a little prohibitive for you for whatever reason, a little off limits for you that you would love to do, that on some level you're probably longing to do for yourself, you just start. And when you take those steps that are the antithesis of the way that you've lived, the ego structure, the old blocking beliefs will rear their head pretty intensely typically, because you're threatening your own status quo, which is what you want to do. The only way we grow is by shaking up our status quo. And so that's all that's happening when fear and anxiety come up around these kinds of growth steps. And so when you experience that, it's like learning to dialogue. I mean, this is deep work I'm talking about. I'm trying to kind of give you a, 6 months worth of of journeying and a little snapshot answer here, but that's kind of my, my best shot at giving you some material to work with. And I'm curious, does that help? How does that land for this person? If she wants to respond at all, I'd love to hear that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'll wait.
Sure.
For a response, I guess, might be a little bit to think about. Let's see if we have, we have another question.
Sure.
That we can talk about. The other question is, my top 2 money personality types seem to be the opposite of each other, yet they only scored a few points apart. Does that mean something for me?
Yeah, it does. So what that would typically indicate is that there may be some conflicting beliefs or behaviors, or a level of intensity, I'll say, in your relationship to money, that we'd want to pay attention to, because what we want to do is bring your archetypes into alignment. And so the way that we do that is we look at your lead archetype is always your sort of, again, key money personality. And then what we would do is you look at the strengths of your second and third archetype, and no matter how they're scored, and you look at how you can bring the strengths of each of those archetypes to integrate them into your lead archetype, to bring greater alignment and kind of temper some of the challenges. And so when you've scored closely together with 2 that seem really conflicting, it's another great question. It just indicates that you probably, that there probably is, again, you've probably received some conflicting messages, or there are different impulses in relation to money operating simultaneously. We want to be able to bring harmony to that, and there are ways of doing that, but it is significant.
Okay, thanks. And I'll have to let you know if we have feedback from that previous question after the presentation. And I see we have, I think this will be the final question if you have time for this last one.
Oh, I do, for sure. Absolutely.
Okay, the question is, my lead archetype is Nurturer with Accumulator and Alchemist as 2 and 3. Mm-hmm. My shadow archetype is Romantic. How do I bring my shadow to the surface or light and be more whole? Okay,
another great question. So here's how that works. Okay, so and this is great for everybody. So in this system, the shadow archetype, the way that you work with your shadow and your persona in this system is that you want to focus on the strengths of your shadow. You don't need to worry about the downside to your shadow archetype in this system. You want to use the strengths of your shadow to temper the challenges of your lead. So in this case, I think it was Nurturer was the lead, and I'm sorry, what was the, Romantic was the shadow. Was the shadow, did
yeah.
I have? Okay.
Nurturer was lead, Romantic was shadow. Yeah.
Okay. So what you want to do, so what this indicates to me is that Romantic has no trouble spending on themselves and sponsoring themselves and having fun, just doing fun things and often doing fun things with money. So that involve money. Again, joie de vivre kind of spirit. And so nurturer has trouble sponsoring themselves and just having fun with money and tends to give it away as fast as it comes in because there's this underlying belief that they're not enough. They don't deserve to just do good things for themselves. And so in your case, you would tap those strengths of romantic, which is a belief that there's always enough, comfortable spending, comfortable having fun with money, comfortable using money for things that bring joy. And you would use those strengths to help give your nurturer permission, so to speak, to have more fun and to stop giving away. I don't know if you are, but to stop feeling obligated to use every bit of money that you make for something other than yourself, one way or another, but giving yourself permission to use money to have fun yourself or for beautiful self-care activities, those kind of things, and to also work on cultivating the belief that there is unlimited abundance in the universe. That the deal with this kind of belief, which I know can sound sort of like another one of these cliche phrases we hear in personal development industry all the time. The deal with that is that this principle, I'll call it a spiritual principle, that there is unlimited abundance in the universe, only can serve us when we are able to believe that unlimited abundance is available to us. It's not just like, oh yeah, there's unlimited abundance in the universe. The deal here is, can we really work through whatever's in the way internally from being able to receive that unlimited abundance ourselves? So we're bringing it down to this very personal level, so that it's not just this amorphous kind of spiritual teaching that we can't wrap our lives around, that we never actually experience, that we walk around, feeling is out of reach to us. And so for someone with nurture as the lead and romantic as the shadow, this would be a really good thing to look at, is whatever belief might be in the way of feeling that it's more than okay to spend money on yourself and enjoy it. Yeah.
Okay.
We always want to look at the
Great.
narrative. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and we did get some feedback from the earlier question, so I'll share that with you. It's thanks so much for your response to my question about the motherhood nurturing question. I think you're right. It is a deeper issue, and small steps with a timeline would be empowering. So I want to thank her for sharing that with us, and thank you for answering her question earlier.
Absolutely.
And I see we're probably about out of time. So I want to thank you again, Michelle, for a really great presentation and also for sharing your money story with us. I want to thank everyone who joined us today, and also everyone who was willing to talk about their money types. We will be sending out the link for the quiz. And Michelle, I just want to confirm, if someone visits this link, they submit their email address and then receive the link to take the quiz. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Okay.
You'd put your name in, right, and then you should get a thank you email right away that has the link directly into the quiz for you to take it. And the quiz is automated, and you'll get automated results immediately after taking it.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So for everyone, we'll be sending this link out as well if you didn't have a chance to take it or write it down. But thank you again so much, Michelle. It was really great.
Oh, you're welcome. You're so welcome. Thanks so much for having me. And thanks so much to everybody for your great questions, really.
Yes. Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.